98 Not Out, sponsored by Shepherd Neame, proud supporters of cricket in Essex.
I've got a confession to make. That's my drunk karaoke song.
Oh, God.
There you go, confession.
What's your sober one?
But that was selected by our next guest. And I'm going to use her Twitter feed to introduce herself. Indomitable, ambitious CEO of Cricket Wales, one of the 39 boards that make up the ECB. A big hello to Leshia Hawkins. How are you?
Good evening, Noswaith Dar from Cardiff. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah,
we're okay.
We're a bit warm in the second studio, but it's not too bad. But yeah, we're getting through it.
Good.
It's been a bit of a first year in charge for you, hasn't it?
Well, it's only been 6 months. It feels like 6 years, but I joined in February. I'd done 7.5 years at the ECB, and this came up. I took the job, arrived on the 10th of February. We were immediately flooded in Wales for the first couple of weeks, and then just a small matter of a global pandemic that kind of jumped out in front of me. So yes, it'd be fair to say that my 100-day plan that every good new CEO should have went completely out the window at about day 30. I moved into my house in Cardiff literally the weekend before lockdown, so I'm still without a sofa. I was without a bed for 3 months. And yes, it's not quite the stuff I'd sort of hoped that I would be doing, but look, it's all good learnings, and we're coming out the other side. We're playing, which is the most important thing. But yes, it's been a bumpy ride. If I had a quid for every time somebody said a baptism of fire for the first 6 months of my job, I'd be a very rich lady right now. But it's been an experience, put it that way.
Did you have to move out of your last house because of neighbours hearing you shouting during the Rio Olympics?
Oh my goodness, you've just completely gone through my whole Twitter. I'm just dreading now what else you're going to drag up.
I haven't. It's just that we put on social media that you were coming on the show tonight, and a chap called Chris Goldie.
Oh goodness, right, good old Chris.
Yeah, has said that you were the author of one of the funniest tweets ever.
Oh, well.
When during the Rio Olympics, she said something along the lines of, "My neighbours must think Jason is my new boyfriend," after Jason Kenny won a tense and exciting cycling event late at night, UK time.
Yes, that was me. I have to be a lot more careful with the whole social media thing now. Now I'm a proper grown-up.
No, you don't.
Yes,
no, you
that
don't.
was me.
We want more of that. So just to clear up a bit of confusion, because there's been a bit of discussion. I mean, it's great when our guests start discussions going and raise a bit of blood amongst our followers and listeners. So, CEO of Cricket Wales, and somebody said, hang on a second, I thought Wales were part of the ECB. But I think, as Brett said, the ECB is made up of 39 boards, of which Cricket Wales is one. Is that my understanding correct?
That's exactly right. We are pretty unique on a number of levels. Every other county board in England, has the same remit if you just sort of look at the first-class counties, so Surrey, Derbyshire, or what have you. The county board, so the participation arm of those counties, they have clearly the same geographical remit as their first-class county, partners and colleagues. With Wales, we're a country, whereas Glamorgan, it is clearly a very significant part of Wales, but it is just a little bit. So that's where we're a little bit different, and obviously all the joys of devolution, which we've been living and breathing, particularly in the last few months, with different regulations and different laws coming back in at different times and so on. So yes, effectively we do the same job as county boards, but sort of structurally and from a governance point of view, we are also very fortunate that we have Sport Wales funding. Clearly we can't be funded by Sport England. So yes, it is effectively the same job, it's just with a couple of add-ons and a little bit of uniqueness and quirkiness.
So what sort of day-to-day stuff does your role involve?
What does it involve, or what should it involve? Obviously as an organisation, we're the participation arm of the ECB for Wales. So, we're charged with nurturing core cricket, your sort of typical Saturday cricket played in whites, but also growing the game, growing its reach, growing its relevance, helping clubs to be the best clubs that they could be. Quite frankly, obviously in the last few months, it's really just been about protecting them financially, But in normal times, hopefully we will get some kind of normality back. It's growing the game, making it as accessible and as attractive as possible, to whoever you are, whatever your age, whatever your gender, disability, postcode, ethnic background, household income, and just trying to make cricket, as I say, as accessible and as attractive as possible. Landing, products from the ECB like All Stars Cricket and Dynamos, which was obviously supposed to come in this summer, but it'll be postponed to next year. And really, as I say, just trying to grow the game and I guess kind of keep that filter as wide as possible, at the top of the funnel, and get the talented players through, obviously, into the Glamorgan pathway and academy and so forth. Because I think if there's one thing that probably cricket in Wales hasn't done so well over the last, well, goodness knows how many years, it's producing England players. So that's going to be a big thing for us in Glamorgan, obviously, to work on together. But yeah, at a recreational level, just taking the game to as many people as possible, putting bats and balls in people's hands, really bluntly put.
What about club cricket in Wales? Is there a thriving scene? Are there a lot of leagues, or do you have clubs local to Wales feeding through to the likes of Glamorgan, let's say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got about 185 affiliated clubs. Obviously, our geography, just the vastness of the geography, in the middle of Wales, I didn't realise this until I got here. There's just literally nothing. So a lot of the population is kind of along the M4 corridor, along the sort of south part, and then there's a sort of smattering of towns and cities across the north. So we have those challenges. But yes, as a game, I mean, in Wales, bluntly, rugby is king, and football is right up there as well. So we are the third sport, and I think by quite some distance at the moment. Like I say, we're lucky, we're back, we're playing. Rugby isn't at the moment, so we've got opportunities, to try and convince a few more people to come over. I think there's a little bit, really honestly, where people think that cricket's like an English sport, whereas, rugby's very much, it is literally a religion. Everywhere I go in Cardiff, I can see that bloody stadium. It just dominates everything. So, we've got a job to do, certainly, but, I'm hearing reports this summer. Now, I get that it's not a normal summer, but I'm hearing reports where, clubs that were struggling to get 3 Saturday teams out last year now have 4 or 5 teams worth of availability, and people are putting on extra teams and friendly teams. Women's cricket is absolutely booming. It's something that, my predecessor and the team here have taken really seriously. I think, women's cricket, bluntly, is really quite patchy across most of England, outside of sort of the southeast corner and a couple of other counties, but they've done an amazing job, and that's sort of just jumped straight back into life. So it's got huge potential. I mean, that was part of the attractiveness for me coming here, was really, okay, look, it's in a good place, and it's kind of taking it from good to great. But yeah, undoubtedly there's market share, to kind of use the corporate term, that we can take from rugby football. But equally, we want to work with them. We want to work with other sports and be collaborative. It's not going to be an easy time for businesses and for sport, clearly, for the next 6, 9, 12, 18 months, who knows. So we need to also work with other sports, and I think that's the one thing that Wales, my reflection anyway, is that the Welsh sports sector has done really, really well in securing the return to play. I haven't lived and breathed the whole kind of situation in England, but sort of what you read and what you hear, it sort of felt a little bit disorganised, whereas in Wales it was a really organised process, and the whole sports sector came together to sort of lobby government and put our case forwards, and I give credit to other colleagues in other sports.
It does sound very similar. We had on your opposite Gus Mackay, the CEO for Cricket Scotland, and we've also been chatting to Dunblane Cricket Club and helping them get kids cricket off the ground. The challenges that you have been mentioning sound very similar to what is going on north of the border. But it does seem that the positive, although you've got challenges and hurdles to overcome, the positives seem to be coming thick and fast. So I think between you and Gus and his team, you're all doing something right. There is a strategy that, despite everything, seems to be working and getting people into the game.
Well, thank you. I hope that's the case. I mean, we're so lucky, obviously, that we do have the membership of the ECB. You know, I was basically, when we had to produce our guidelines for return to play for the Welsh Government, I basically just stole the ECB's homework and just made a few amends. So, you know, we were so lucky in that respect. And having a chief medical officer that we can point to at the ECB and Professor Nick Pearce was, you know, that really was a difference in, you know, genuinely weeks of you know, us being able to get back sooner. So, but yeah, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
It was a compliment.
Oh, thank you very much.
How much is COVID affecting what was originally going to be your long-term plans? I mean, are you having to change plans? Are you likely to lose finances, or has that not been said through?
Yeah, I think the honest answer is we're absolutely certain to not have as much money as we were hoping to. You know, cricket was obviously put in a very good place with the broadcast contract that the ECB did, and, you know, there has been major challenges and hurdles put in the way of that. I heard Dominic speaking before about the importance of obviously having England men's, particularly England men's international cricket going on just from a pure kind of commercial point of view, and what the broadcasters value and what they pay for. But there's still going to clearly be a hole in, you know, cricket's P&L as a whole. So I'm sure that we won't be immune to that. You know, when you're talking about, do I need to change my plans? The plans sort of change on a weekly or monthly basis, in truth. We've been, I guess, preparing for the worst but always hoping for the best all the way through this, you know, from when everything hit through to now, and there's still a few more months before I think we'll have any kind of level of certainty of our funding, both from ECB and, as I say, from Sport Wales. You know, the public purse contribution to sport, I think, is only ever going to go in one direction, even without a global pandemic. So
well, you've got one thing. Sorry to interrupt. You've got one thing hugely in your favour, though, which Scotland may be looking on enviously. Welsh Fire and the 100.
Yeah.
I know in the past you've been an advocate of the 100, and Colin Graves, the outgoing ECB chair, who it was his baby and is now passing it on. What are your views on the 100 happening? Will it be in an amended form, or will it be intact? And how will it affect Welsh cricket?
Yeah, I mean, I heard your comments before, so this now becomes quite a difficult question for me to answer. But look, I have, even when I was at the ECB, you know, understanding kind of broadcast rights and being able to kind of control your own destiny as much as one can. I do buy the idea of, you know, new audiences, you know, have to do something and, you know, to grow the game. As I said at the start, you know, it's as much our responsibility as it is, you know, at the elite level. You know, just from a Welsh perspective, though, and sort of through the Welsh lens, that kind of Welsh identity was so important, you know, particularly to Glamorgan, but obviously the knock-on effect then to us, you know, picking up that point that I was saying of Cricket Wales being representative of the whole country, but Glamorgan, even within Wales, sometimes only being seen as that bit down in the southeast around Cardiff, and that's, you know, just for those people that live there. So having that Welsh identity was a big deal for us, and I talk about, you know, us in sort of Welsh cricket as a whole, having the men's and the women's teams and the competitions kind of side by side. You know, I was also involved in and a huge supporter of Kia Super League, but having, you know, the men's and women's teams side by side, that's got to be good for the women's game as a whole. Obviously, we've got the Western Storm in the domestic Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy. We're involved in that in Wales now. We weren't a part of the consortium that was in the old Western Storm in the KSL, but we'll be playing a full part in that. So, yeah, look, I think it is super important. I think we do have to back it. I know there's tons of arguments, and we don't probably have all the time to go into that now. But yeah, certainly from a Welsh perspective, and having that Welsh brand, and having, you know, real marquee players coming over, and then from our perspective in the participation game, being able to, you know, sort of get their time when they're over and get them into schools and go and inspire kids. As I say, both men's and women's team. It was one thing that Mark Wallace and I spoke about in my first couple of weeks when things were vaguely normal and we were making all these plans. You know, he was super keen to get those players out, both the men and the women, and to support, you know, what our efforts. So, yeah, look, I'm looking forward to it. I really hope it can be what it was intended to be. I take your point of before of, you know, it needs to be the best players in full grounds, and, you know, it's, we're reliant on vaccines and so forth in order to be able to do that. But yeah, we're fully behind it.
So, are you now one of the new generation of women that's coming to take over cricket? Obviously, we're seeing more and more lady presenters, females in important positions. It can't be a bad thing for cricket, can it? That we are now seeing more female representation coming through, like Claire Connor and stuff like that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Claire's obviously been around, she won't mind me saying, for years and years. I just think we need to, almost blur the lines a little bit. And, with the media thing, why do men just have to commentate on men's cricket? Why do women just have to commentate on women's cricket? And I think it's really important that you have, women commenting on cricket as a whole. Whether
Ebony's
that's women...
listening, remember? Ebony's listening. She's tuned in, she told us.
But, in all seriousness, I grew up in North Yorkshire, and I knew of this Rachel Hayhoe Flint lady. I was aware of her, but cricket was never a sport that I thought I could access. I always say it's like equestrian is to me now. I know that people ride horses, but I wouldn't know how to get into it. I don't think I'd be made to feel particularly welcome. Sorry to anyone who's in equestrian. But, women's cricket back then to me was kind of like equestrian is now. And I think if we can just break down those barriers, and for young girls to see women on field, in the media, in boring administration jobs like mine, whatever it is, it's, to me, I've never really consciously thought, oh, God, I'm the only woman in this room. Oh, dear. Or is that a good thing? I don't know. It's never really struck me. But when I got this job, I got so many messages from people that I didn't even know who, were saying, I just think it's brilliant. It's so inspiring to see, women sort of breaking down the glass ceiling and getting involved in men's environments and all that. So, even if it's important to the next generation, that kind of weighs even more heavily on my conscience than sort of what I need to do for my own board, to be honest with you.
Maybe you're a bit different, though, because you do love a bit of sports administration, don't you? You are a bit of a junkie.
Yeah. And
non-executive director of England Athletics.
Yes, I mean the whole administration thing I think is basic because I'm just no good at playing it. If I was any good, clearly I would love to be out on the field and earning some mega bucks. But this is kind of the next best thing for me. But yes, I'm a non-executive director at England Athletics as well. I got that position when I was still at the ECB, and that was, I think that in some ways possibly got me this job as much as my ECB one. Just sort of seeing a different sport from a different view, being in a boardroom and almost demystifying it to yourself. I am an awful runner. I wouldn't even call myself an athlete. That would just be too much of an overstatement. But to see another sport, a medium-sized sport, obviously having come from the ECB, and to see it through the eyes of a boardroom and what goes on in there, that probably gave me confidence and gave me sort of more interest and aspiration to sort of climb higher. And obviously I've ended up where I've ended up. So yes, a sports administration junkie, though. Maybe that's the new Twitter bio.
Yeah.
So what will be the long-term plan for you? You can run the ECB in a few years?
Why not? Why not?
Why not? I suppose why not in principle. I've always looked at the salary of the chief executive of the ECB not as a salary but just really as danger money. I just think, you're on a hiding to nothing. And, all joking apart about the gender thing, is the ECB ready for a female chief exec? In my lifetime, maybe in my sort of ambition span of the next few years. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I've been asked this question by a couple of people. I say I've only been in this role for 6 months, and there's so much that I need to do and I want to do here. So, and if you told me, 12 months ago that I'd be living in Cardiff and be the CEO of Cricket Wales, I wouldn't have believed that either. So, yeah, who knows? I would love to do a CEO of another sort of small nation that maybe does have a performance team like Scotland, like Ireland, like the Netherlands. And maybe that's the stepping stone. But I don't think Tom Harrison's going to be too bothered at the moment.
I think, given that Claire Connor being elected president of MCC now, MCC, even if you go back 20 years. To suggest that something like a woman president was ever going to be likely, I mean, it hasn't taken too long for that to happen. And in happening, it hasn't really raised that many eyebrows. I genuinely think that, women's place in the world, I mean, yes, there's still work to be done, but it's come so far that, things like this happen. and people accept it and nod and go, yeah, that's the right person for the job.
Yeah, that's it. It's my point of, young girls seeing that, and young boys and, middle-aged men seeing that and just going, okay, this is the new normal. It is the normalisation of, women in positions of, profile and or power in, business, but obviously particularly in sport. It's funny, Claire and I actually did joke about this. We were at the Ruth Strauss test last summer, and we were talking about Kumar Sangakkara and his presidency, and he then passes it on to somebody, and it wasn't even a joke. I said, well, he would probably pass it on to a woman, and you're kind of front of the queue. But I did say to her at the time, when you get it, clearly when you pass it on, I'm here, my light's on and my arm's up basically. But no, she is the absolute best choice. She will do an amazing job. She's actually shared something on our WhatsApp group that I haven't actually got around to reading yet, but about kind of, women's position in sport and in cricket. But, I agree with you, and it's brilliant that, as you say, it's sort of gone, yeah, okay, cool, great, let's kind of move on, and it's not such a big deal, and I think when that is the normality, I think we're winning.
Now, you mentioned it a couple of times this evening, you're running, and I know you've been for a run this evening.
Yeah.
I've got to mention, you ran the London Marathon in 2014. How hard is it?
I thought that was the time that you were giving me, 2014. I was like, no, it's like 4 hours something. Yes, I won't do another marathon, partly because my mum has banned me from running marathons, because for the last month of my training, all I would do was just cry. She'd just ring me and I'd just burst into tears. It all just got a bit too much at the end. I'm not a runner. I lost a load of weight back, sort of when it would have been 7-8 years ago, and had never really run for anything except closing time. And I was just like, right, well, the next logical step is clearly to run a marathon. I'm a bit of an all-or-nothing kind of girl. So yes, did that. And now I just run for, I say fun. It's not fun. I'm terrible. But it's my kind of de-stress time, and it's an hour to myself, and I can run off a bit of the curry and the cheese and the wine that I consume for the rest of the week. But yes, I am still running. And, all joking apart, this was the best thing about lockdown, if there was a really good thing about it. I couldn't obviously get out and sort of see people and meet people in the clubs in Wales. So I decided, right, with my weekend run, I'm going to do trips out to cricket clubs in and around Cardiff. So it was my way of sort of getting out and being a bit of a tourist and getting a bit of fresh air as well. But yes, still running, but not an athlete.
Going from running for the bus to running a marathon.
Yeah.
What for you were the biggest? Was it stamina? Was it fitness? Was it self-motivation? What gets you that far?
Well, I'm just a competitive little so-and-so. I always say I'm not fit, I'm stubborn. So mentally, I always kind of felt that I was strong, but it was sort of mental belief. They would say there's a stubbornness once you get going. It's like, well, I'm just going to get this done. I'm not going to enjoy it. Running doesn't like me. I don't like running, but I'm going to get it done. But I think it was belief and confidence. So I was training for the year before, and then I had a fall on a run, and I blew my meniscus cartilage in my knee, and it was all over Red Rover. It was awful. But then having that extra year made me realise, look, you can do this. But yeah, obviously, yes, of course, running a few miles really does help. But I ran for Sports Aid, the sports charity that helps sort of young aspiring athletes, and we had Danny Crates, the Paralympian, as one of our ambassadors, and we had a little reception evening. Obviously, he's out your way, isn't he? And we had a little reception evening, and I will always remember the words that he imparted on us. He'd done a few marathons. He was doing it the year that I did it. I beat him, by the way, but anyway. And he said, you've done the miles, you've done the training. Now all you need to do, it was a couple of weeks to go, is get good sleep, eat really well, turn up with a great mental attitude and smash it. And I was just like, well, that's it. It's just so simple, isn't it? But yeah, and that is it. I wasn't aiming for any kind of time. I was just aiming for a medal.
Well, here's a target for you then, if you're competitive, and we want to see how many new listeners and likes we can get across Wales.
Okay, what's my target?
Let's start you off with a very gentle 100.
Okay, good number.
And we will be watching, and we will be in regular touch.
Okay.
Scotland, when we threw the gauntlet down there, a lot of Scottish people came forward and got involved, so we shall be looking to spread our tentacles across Wales, north, south, and that bit in the middle that you don't like?
I don't know that I didn't like it. There's just very little. It's beautiful. I drove through it. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's just no cricket clubs or anything there. But
Betwsi Coed, there's a club there, I know that.
where's that, sorry?
Betwsi Coed, it's kind of in that middle bit, going north a bit. Very picturesque.
Past Brecon?
Yes, I think so.
Right.
Heading towards London, no, up that way.
Okay, yes.
So, but anyway, we want more and more Welsh listeners, and we want to know the Welsh story. So you have to keep us in touch, and we will support it. And anything you need from us, don't hesitate to ask.
You are very kind. Leave it with me. Send me a link to the show, and I'll tell everyone that Dominic Cork was on. I won't even bother mentioning me. That'll probably get you more followers.
Just as good. don't
Facebook
worry.
and Twitter, 98 Not Out. Easy. And Instagram.
Leave it with me.
Thank you very much indeed for the time.
Nice to speak to you guys. Stay
Thank
safe.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.